is the Happy Scientist Podcast. Each episode is designed to make you more focused, more productive, and more satisfied in the lab. You can find us online at bitesizebio.com/happy scientist. Your hosts are Kenneth Vogt, founder of the executive coaching firm Vera Claritas, and Dr. Nick Oswald, PhD, bioscientist, and founder of Bitesize Bio.
Hello, this is Nick Oswald, welcoming you to this Bitesize Bio webinar, which today is a live episode of the Happy Scientist Podcast. If you want to become a happier, healthier, and more productive scientist, you are in the right place. With me, as always, is the Bitesize Bio team's Mr. Miyagi, Mr. Kenneth Vogt. In these sessions, we will hear from Ken mostly on principles that will help shape you for a happier and more successful career. And along the way, I'll pitch in with points from my personal experience as a scientist and from working with Ken. If you have any questions along the way, please put them into the questions box on the right side of your screen, and I will put them to Ken. And today we'll be discussing about when experiments don't go as planned, how to stay curious instead of frustrated. Take it away, Ken.
All right. This is an episode I particularly wanted to do with Nick because he has told me about problems he's had in the lab in the past. And of course, it goes beyond the lab. There's all kinds of ways that things can not go as planned. And Nick's got a lot of experience with that, so it's going to be a good conversation. I will start off by mentioning something kind of interesting to me. Nick got his PhD because of slime mold. Like, how is that possible? How do you work with something that is that far from, call it intelligent, right? And yet it has its own way of doing things, and things can go wrong in ways you may not even have anticipated, ways you can't even imagine. And in some ways, when you're studying something like that, in any basic science, you may well encounter things you just didn't see coming. So the question will be, are you going to get frustrated? Are you going to get angry? Are you going to get scared? Or are you just going to just figure it out? Are you just going to work with it? So we're going to dig into some of that. There are lots of ways things can go wrong. An experiment that you've planned could just fail. It just didn't work, right? It could be some part of it failed. Maybe some equipment didn't work as you expected. Maybe it actually broke, but maybe you just didn't know the equipment as well as you thought you did. Or you could get your results and now you've got all this data that just doesn't make any sense to you. And I've even been on the receiving end of that, and I'm no biologist, right? But I've definitely done experiments where I got data and looked at it and went, I can't even draw a conclusion here. It's just hamburger. I don't know what to do with this. So I guess that's the first step of this. You can look at all the possible ways that your experiments could go wrong. And you could look at that and it could spark panic. Like, oh God, it's a miracle I could ever do anything properly. It's a miracle we ever get any results that are worth anything. And honestly, sometimes that's true. You are doing miraculous work sometimes. Sometimes you're doing things that have never been done before. And that's part of the reason why we experiment. It's like, well, no one's tried this. Let's find out what happens, right? So I guess that's the first question I would put to you, Nick. When you're dealing with stuff where things absolutely can go wrong. In fact, it wouldn't be that uncommon for things to go wrong. What do you do about that? How do you steel yourself to be able to handle that kind of environment?
I don't know. I guess that if you're talking about a technique not working or an approach not working or something, then it has to be that you go in with that spirit, I would say. Is how do you start? Is this a learning run? Is this Is this are you expecting to have to do this 10 times before it works the first time? That's what I would say. Is it's about what you're expecting when you begin, and is the expectation realistic? Is it flexible? I would say is another way to look at it. Going with flexible expectations.
Sure. Well, to put this in the context of biology, you're working with living things, and one way an experiment can fail is that everything dies, and I mean that could be pretty traumatic, right? I mean, it may be traumatic to you if a higher life form dies. It could be traumatic to you when your single celled organisms die, because you're engaged in something you care about, and maybe it's not like caring about a pet or caring about a person, but you do still care about getting some kind of useful result. And so you're invested in your experiments. You're invested when they go wrong, and that can hurt. And you can try and write it off like, look, it's just a bunch of amoebas, who cares, right? But it does matter, right? It mattered to you. It mattered because it's part of your own career progress. It's part of your own work, and you do want things to succeed. And it is fair for you to want things to go well, and it's reasonable to expect that I have to have things go well at least some of the time, or what good am I? I won't be useful to my lab. I won't be useful to my funders. I won't be useful to myself if I can never learn anything new, if I can never gain any experience or get any productive result out of something. So take yourself into consideration. You're part of the process. So the next things I would like to talk about is the benefits of interested awareness. That is, remember, your psychology is part of this, and you need to be psychologically flexible. Sometimes you have to toughen up a little bit. Sometimes you have to be able to deal with the fact that sometimes you fail. Sometimes things go wrong, and sometimes things go wrong you didn't anticipate. There may be a situation where you're going, there's only a 50-50 chance this is going to work, and you're kind of prepared for that. But if you're doing something that you had every expectation is going to work and it fails, that can introduce an emotional factor. There can be some suffering involved just for you, and it's really easy to blow that off and say, look, everybody has experiments fail. Everybody has these tests in the lab, and therefore I should be able to deal with it. Well, yes, you should. We want you to be able to. If you're going to succeed in this career, you're going to need to deal with that. But yeah, you understand some people wash out too. So you don't want to be one of those, but it happens. Some people are not able to get the job done, maybe even intellectually. They don't understand enough. They don't know their equipment well enough. They don't know their protocols well enough. They don't know their kits well enough. And it's because they didn't cross over that barrier that they're having difficulties at times. So, make sure you count the cost for yourself. Understand what it's going to take for you personally. Understand what is required of you professionally. And that way you won't just be fighting, against the wind, right? If you're in situations where you're engaging in an experiment and you just don't know what you're doing, you feel clueless, that's going to be a far more difficult environment than for going into it with eyes open, where I know what I'm up against. And it doesn't mean you never go up against things that are hard. Sometimes things are difficult. Sometimes they are demanding. Sometimes they're intellectually demanding, and sometimes even physically demanding. But first, do your homework. Know what you're doing. Know what you're getting into. Let's put it that way. Because there are some things you aren't going to know for sure what you're doing until you get in there. And that's fine. If you have a curiosity about things. When something goes wrong, your reaction doesn't have to be, oh, I failed. It could be, that's interesting. Why did that happen? Why that result? What preceded that result? What could have been done to avoid that result? And sometimes you're engaged in an experiment when you realize, yeah, I could have done a lot of things to stop that from happening. But in some cases, if you take the safeties off, as it were, you're creating more possibilities. There's more opportunity for discovery. There's more opportunity to say, well, let's find out what happens. It's not always the end of the world when something fails. Sometimes it's like, it failed because I allowed an environment for it to fail, because I wanted to see what happened when it fails, right? And I guess you got to look at that and say, is that something I could just do privately without discussion? Is that something I should engage with other people on? Should I be saying, hey, let's take a chance here for a purpose and have that conversation? Now, some people may agree with you, some people may not agree with you. Sometimes they will disagree, but say, but go ahead anyway. Let's see what happens. And if you're communicative about those things, that creates a little bit of a safety bubble around you, right? Even if everything else goes wrong, you're still okay. Your experiment failed, but you didn't fail, and that also matters here. And so, I will pause for a minute and see if Nick would like to weigh in on anything here.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking that there's experiments not going the way you thought they should go. There's experiments where it didn't work. You didn't get a result, or something went wrong because of a mistake you made, and you go back and fix the mistake. And sometimes there's an experiment going wrong because you just didn't know why. You don't know why it went wrong, and
Right.
And so, but in each case, each of those cases, that this still applies. The interested awareness. It's probably interested awareness mixed with, I mean, the ideal scenario for scientists is outcome independence. You're do the experiment with an open mind, and are not attached to what outcome you're going to get. But as a human being, that can be quite difficult. But interested.
Also, just in the real world, that's always can be difficult. Your funder may have its own ideas. Right?
Well, this is the thing. You're under pressure to be, whatever contract you're on, whether it's your graduate school project, or it's you're on a contract, or you're employed. You need to make progress, and you can waste weeks of progress on things not working because you don't know why. If you don't know why, which can be really frustrating. But you still have to maintain the best state of mind to stay in is this interested awareness, this outcome independence, and just staying patient. But again, sometimes you're battling against the the realities of what you need to get done as well at the same time as that.
Right. So that takes us to the next slide real well. Sometimes it is your mindset that is at issue. Things are going to go wrong. That's going to happen. But is your knee-jerk reaction to feel that it's a failure? That can just be a reflex, and you don't have to do that. And if you're working in a lab and in the biology field, you do work that is hard. You do work that lots of people cannot do. And if you accept that as the environment, that this is an environment that requires intellectual rigor, maybe even physical rigor, even emotional rigor. If you realize that is actually how it is, now it's not so personal if something doesn't go quite as planned. One of the things that happens if something doesn't go as planned, how are you going to react to it? Are you going to resist it? Because resistance can be very counterproductive. Whereas you can have productive discernment. If something goes wrong and your first reaction is like, well, isn't that interesting? What did that tell us? What did that mean? Now, sometimes you're going to uncover, I know what that means. It means I screwed up. It means I didn't follow the protocol. It means I missed something I shouldn't have missed. It is still worthwhile to recognize that without resistance. Don't beat yourself up about a failure, even a failure that was not as professional as you could have been. Well, then be more professional the next time. I mean, that is what happens. Everybody learns from when things go wrong. And if you've never had anything go wrong, well, first off, I don't believe you. And second of all, you must not be very productive then, because it requires testing the limits. That is part of what is going on every time you launch an experiment. And if you cultivate curiosity, that changes what any challenging situation. A challenging situation could cause you fear. It could cause you remorse, or it could just go, well, that's interesting. What do we learn here? What did I just see? And it doesn't have to be an automatic aversion. You can lean into things and like, well, let's see what really happened there. I remember working on a car with my dad. My dad was just a shade tree mechanic. He wasn't a professional or anything. But when things went wrong, sometimes he just got mad. But sometimes he's like, that's interesting. Why did it do that? I liked him a lot better when he was that second person. And by the way, the people you work with are the same. If you have an experiment fail and then you're a monster to be around, you're not fun to work with. You're not somebody people are going to want to team up with. Don't be that person. Be the person who's like, well, that's interesting. Let's find out what's next. And you also get to define what is actually uncomfortable. If everything that doesn't go completely according to the rule book is painful to you, uncomfortable to you, you're going to be uncomfortable all the time. And you don't have to be. Now, that doesn't mean that you should just blow off that, oh, well, I dropped the ball here. No, definitely fix that. But sometimes you didn't drop the ball and it still didn't go right because there was something that wasn't anticipated. Maybe something that wasn't anticipated by you, but it might be that it wasn't anticipated by someone else that you couldn't do anything about. So you don't have to try and control every situation. Better for you to take charge of the situation, and you will have a lot less difficulties, both intellectually and emotionally, if you do that. Another thing that pops up is when you encounter something that, let's call it a setback, that now I have to backtrack and I have to redo something. Well, great. Now you have an opportunity. I can do it better this time. I can do it safer this time. I can do it. I can add new layers of possibilities, things that I'm going to be watching for now that I wasn't watching for the last time because I wasn't anticipating it. But now this could happen, and now you're paying attention, and you can see it from the beginning, perhaps, and that creates a whole new opportunity for learning and discovery. Just looking at my notes here, and I'm trying to understand what I said.
I could chime in here actually with a little bit. So I'm thinking that when you're talking about things going wrong, what's your reaction going to be? Is it going to be curious as to what went wrong and how it can be fixed, or whatever? Are you going to have an emotional reaction and things like that? The one backdrop to this is that in science, I don't know if it's as much as any other job, but in science, a lot of things go wrong all the time. And so you have to, it's par for the course that you're going to have to deal with bumps. And the question of whether you allow it to get you down, whether you take it personally, whether you feel de-energized by it or whatever, it really matters, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so are you going to, accepting that your job gives you a degree of setback on a regular basis, are you going to allow those setbacks to suck the life out of you? Or are you going to sort of step back from them so that they don't do that and you can still maintain as neutral a position as you can?
Sure. Well, this does go to one other point that I wanted to make. When you encounter that, because you're absolutely going to encounter it, is your knee-jerk reaction always, I have to do something, I have to take action? Is it possible that sometimes action is not the best thing? Maybe contemplation is presently the best thing. Maybe acceptance is the best thing right now. Maybe you don't need to fix it, or maybe you can't fix it, and that's just how it is. And knowing that I cannot fix this problem may cause you to redesign your experiment entirely. It may require changes to the protocol that now you've got data, right? This is why we have to change the protocol here, right? Action wasn't necessarily it. It wasn't like, I have to make this cleaner, I have to make it warmer, I have to make it whatever else, action isn't always the answer. And that's a hard one for those of us who really like to take action. Sometimes we have to admit that action is not the appropriate step right now. Doesn't mean you won't get to action, but if it is just your default, you're gonna be a bull in a china shop. You're gonna keep breaking things. That's how things break, especially when you add your action to the mix.
Definitely takes patience to be a scientist.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation there too. There's plenty of things that you could do for a living that don't really require much patience. This is not one of them. And in fact, you need to be above average in patience to do something as demanding as being a scientist. And if you can't accept that, you may need to reassess. But if you're hearing this and going, well, wait a minute, I can accept that, maybe you just never considered accepting it before. Now it's new. Now that's not to say that you have to just tolerate anything and everything. That's not the same as patience. There are times when you do need to stand up and say, no more, can't have this. And that might be about the work itself, but it might be about your work environment. Maybe there are times when you do need to stand up and say, this isn't right, or this is going to continue to be a problem here, and that's going to hurt us in the long run. Sometimes you may look at it and look, I just got in this. I like working in the lab. I didn't want to play politics. I didn't show up here because I wanted to manage anything. I just wanted to do the work. And those are appropriate choices at certain points in your career. But at some point, you may realize, I do need to step up a little more. I do need to take a stand. I need to have a position, because your opinion, as you become more and more seasoned and more valued, your opinion is going to matter to others. And if you hoard that to yourself, think, well, that's not what I want to do. Well, we're all doing things that are hard, and that's part of adult life. Go ahead, step up, do some things that are uncomfortable sometimes. I'm not saying your whole life should be uncomfortable, and it's like every experiment is not always going to work. If you set that as the standard, that everything has to go according to plan every single time from this point forward forever, you're going to have a tormented career. It's gonna be so hard on you. If you can be a little more resilient, be a little more flexible, you'll find that experiments going wrong won't be the end of the world, and they won't be as common either. You'll actually get better at not having surprising failures. But I mean, that is one of the hard parts about getting more experience is you get so good at nothing ever going wrong that you never have the opportunities that come with something surprises you. Surprise is a really valuable part of science. Never lose that. Maybe you might even think that's kind of childlike. Well, then be childlike at least some of the time, because that's where the opportunity for discovery is gonna often be found. So make sure you get to play in that pool. So that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about when it came to when your experiments go wrong. Is there anything you'd like to add, Nick?
No, well, apart from going back to the thing that I always say in these things, I don't know, it's the thing I seem to repeat over and over again, is that one of the reasons that we can it can get frustrated when they don't go as planned is if you're going into it into an experiment with the mindset that you need a result. I'm expecting, I expect this to happen. I need this result. I need this bit over here to light up because that shows my protein is where I thought it would be, or something like that. And for me, that's not the way to do science, because science is asking a question. Mm-hmm. And again, asking a question rather than trying to get a result is another way of disarming the whole, that whole trap that you were just talking about of being pulled into requiring an outcome, getting frustrated about it, and so on. And so asking the question is another way to pull yourself out of the trap, but it's also the most scientifically pure way to do it as well. Mm-hmm. So that kind of rounds that off by going, yeah, just do science the way it's meant to be done. But I know it's not that easy when things aren't working and things like that. But it's just a good way to have a barometer to have for yourself, or a compass rather, to have for yourself of, am I asking questions, or am I pushing for results?
Right. Well, as you've described this, and you've described this to me many times, I've often wondered, if we're doing an experiment, isn't the whole point of an experiment is we don't know how it turns out? Otherwise, is it an experiment or just an exercise? If you're actually doing real experiments, then you don't know the outcome. If you think you do, you're just doing an exercise. It's not the same thing. And there are exercises worth doing, but I would think that's when you're in a learning environment where the professor already knows what the outcome is, and is having you do the experiment so you too can learn what the outcome is. But that's not, once you've hit the lab, you're graduated, folks. You are engaging with the unknown. This is new. And it's beautiful, and it's so lovely that people like you are doing it. Because if you weren't doing it, who else would do it? I won't be doing it. We need you doing it. So thank you for doing it.
It's funny. I was just having this chat with ChatGPT the other day, debating stuff, and I like to do that and go in there and try and debate a view with it to test the view. But it was about the methods of how science is taught, and I already had this idea anyway before. But the sort of upshot was that the worst part of the way that science is taught is labs. When you're given you're in training labs, you're given experiments generally which have a predetermined outcome, and it just starts people off on such the wrong idea. Mm-hmm. Did for me anyway, of what an experiment is. Experiment is trying something to see what happens, not trying to get something to end in a certain way. And it's not that it lasts. And for most people, for people in this sort of audience, it's not they're not doing undergrad labs, but just an observation that's where that idea starts. I think anyway, of the shooting for a result rather than actually doing an experiment. So.
Right. Well, that's one of the reasons why you are a co-host on The Happy Scientist. I'm introducing concepts, but you're putting them to the test. You are actually the experiment subject here.
Oh, really? Now you tell me.
Well, yeah. Well, but now your listeners get to benefit by that because they see the difference between, I show up with something that I believe I know. So I wanted to get across to you. And I might ask you questions to see if you'll come to the same conclusion. But once it gets into that realm of the unknown, well, now we don't know what the presumed outcome is. And that's where all the juice is. So thank you for providing that service to the Bitesize Bio community, Nick, CEO of Bitesize Bio.
Thank you for setting it up.
All right, well, that's a wrap for me today.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So that's the end of what can I say today. Thank you to you, the audience, for listening in, whether that be live today or later on demand. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to The Happy Scientist on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. Listen back to our early episodes, which are packed with equally useful wisdom. And of course, tell your colleagues so we can help spread the Happy Scientist. So until next time, until then, good luck in your research and goodbye from all of us at Bitesize Bio, including Mr. Miyagi.
The Happy Scientist is brought to you by Bitesize Bio, your mentor in the lab. Bitesize Bio features thousands of articles and webinars contributed by hundreds of PhD scientists and scientific companies who freely offer their hard-won wisdom and solutions to the Bitesize Bio community.